First of all, I was right-handed, so that was going to make it rough. But the other more important thing was that I was a devoted kickball player. Now, out on recess, I had some teachers on the playground who were actually fine with my playing kickball, as long as I was careful. There were some others, however, who were a little more cautious, and they didn't want me playing kickball. They didn't want me walking around the playground. So I had to sit on a bench the whole recess. Now, sitting on the bench actually had some merit. So as my right hand was wrapped in plaster, I began to get really curious about my left hand, and more specifically, what I could do with my left fingers. So, I found out, for example, that if I tensed my fingers, I could bend just the tips. And that was really cool as a 9-year-old. My mom didn't think it was so cool, but she eventually got over that. Then after a few days, this got kind of boring. So I started to get curious about how far I could bend my fingers backward. Oh, yeah, that's exactly the reaction I wanted. So the first day, I played with my pointer finger, and I went back pretty far. And the next day, I played with my middle finger, and it went back pretty far. Yep, some of you are flinching a little more. The next day, third finger, it didn't really go back that far. But the next day, I started to play with my pinky finger, and it went back. Yep, there's this one. So this was really cool. I'm 9, remember? So for the next several days, I would play with that pinky finger a little bit more. Bend it back a little bit more, and shake it out, because it kind of hurt. And then I would bend it back a little bit more, and shake it out, until finally I bent it back hard. And I could touch the back of my hand with my pinky finger. All right, no more bending, I promise. That was mind-blowing. and the only mind-blowing thing I'm going to talk about this morning. But it leaves me wondering, okay, what does this have to do with perseverance? We're living in a time where I imagine many of us are finding ourselves flinching and squirming as we bend into uncomfortable situations and relationships. We are, as a community of perseverance, people who are working tirelessly, right, to make the world a better, kinder, healthier place to live. And that's hard work. And with some people and in some places, that's really painful work. So I'm imagining that perhaps one of the many reasons that we come to worship together in this community is it's like this is our bench. This is the place where we get to come and give and receive support from our together in our collective discomfort. It's where we might come to practice and prepare for those times where we anticipate bending toward our discomfort. And I think it's a place we come to rest in the delight of this beloved community. I am so excited to be here on the bench with you this morning. So I'll invite you now to put both feet on the ground. Shift in your chair a little bit as you get comfortable. Perhaps close your eyes or lower your gaze. I have a reading to share by John O'Donohue, an excerpt from To Bless the Space Between Us, and we'll have some reflective time that you know. To change is one of the great dreams of every heart. To change the limitations, the sameness, the banality, and the pain. So often we look back on patterns of behavior, the kind of decisions we make repeatedly and that have failed to serve us well. And we aim for a new and more successful path or way of living. But change is difficult for us. So often we opt to continue an old pattern rather than risking the danger of difference. We are also often surprised by change that seems to arrive out of nowhere. We find ourselves crossing some new threshold we had never anticipated. Like spring secretly at work within the heart of winter, below the surface of our lives, huge changes are in fermentation. We never suspect a thing. Then, when the grip of some long, enduring winter mentality begins to loosen, we find ourselves vulnerable to a flourish of possibility, and we are suddenly negotiating the challenge of a threshold. So I'd like to share another story with you, and I promise there will be no more bending fingers or any other limbs on my body. I'll start with a quote by the Inca philosopher and mountaineer Arne Ness. Mountains are big, very big, but they are also great, very great. They have dignity and other aspects of greatness. They are solid, stable, unmoving. A Sanskrit word for them is aga, that which does not go. When we are climbing a mountain, it may witness our behavior with a somewhat remote or mild benevolence. The mountain never fights against us, and it will hold back avalanches for as long as it can. But sometimes human foolishness and pride can result in human misfortune. Back in 1993, I had the opportunity to climb my first big mountain. I was one of 18 climbers, 13 men and 5 women, climbing Mount Rainier in the state of Washington, with 2 of my mountaineering heroes, Lou Whitaker and Ed Viesters. At 14,411 feet, Mount Rainier is the tallest mountain in the Cascade Range, with more glacial ice cover than any other mountain in the contiguous United States. So climbing this mountain was a really big deal for me. On the morning of our summit, shortly after waking and before I got dressed in my climbing gear, I wrote these words in my journal. It's 1:30 a.m. and it's cold and dark, but the stars in the sky are brilliant. I've never seen so many stars. I can't imagine being anywhere else on Earth this morning. We leave in half an hour and my stomach is rumbling. I don't really feel great, but it's probably because I'm nervous. Those butterflies Mom always says I get before I do something important, they just aren't cooperating yet. They'll settle down once we get started and head for the summit, I'm sure of it. At 2 o'clock sharp, we clipped into our respective rope teams. Lou, our intrepid leader, scanned the group, threw his right arm up in the air, thrust his ice axe forward and said, "We're on our way, baby!" And with those words, the butterflies in my stomach launched in grumbles, dull waves of anxiety that, again, I was sure would dissipate once we really got moving. For the next several hours, we plodded through the darkness, following a snowy, icy pathway toward the top. My nose tingled in a chill, and my heart fluttered, really it fluttered, in delight as I watched my climbing companions trudging ahead, a line of headlamps illuminating the side of the mountain. Over the course of the morning, those rumblings in my stomach had morphed into all-out cramps. Though I continued to work at convincing myself these will pass. One step at a time, I told myself. Breathe. Focus. I knew what was going on, and I knew that there was only one thing I could do to relieve my pain. At our final rest stop before summiting, as the sun was beginning to rise, we were standing atop Disappointment Cleaver, an outcropping of steep rubble and cliffs overlooking Eamons Glacier at 12,300 feet. We were well above the tree line now. On other mountains I'd climbed with less snow and ice, there might have been a small protrusion of boulders that I might have ducked behind. Here, however, I was looking down on the last protrusion of boulders I would see before reaching the top, and the spasms in my stomach were making me keel over. I knew I wouldn't make it much further if I didn't take care of this. I was feeling sick, both with those waves coming and going, and at the thought of failing. What are people going to think? What's going to happen to me? Why didn't I take care of this while it was still dark outside? Finally, with no other options dropping out of the rest, no other options short of dropping out of the rest of the climb, I stood with my feet firmly planted, I took a long, deep breath. And as the sweat worked its way from the crown of my head down my left temple into my chin strap on my mountain climbing helmet, I stepped forward toward Lou, and with humble urgency, I whispered, "I have to go to the bathroom." For his part, Lou was empathic. With a smirk on his face, he took hold of my shoulders, looked me squarely in the eyes, and gently, well, I wasn't shaking like this, but anyway, and gently, turning my body to face the edge of the cliff behind us, pointed and whispered, "Right over there. Get as close to the edge of the cliff as you can, and ask a few people to stand in front of you. This happens to all of us." A few seconds later, my 4 female companions had positioned themselves and their gear around me like an impenetrable fortress. I was embarrassed. I was relieved. And within minutes, I had survived and was clipped back into my rope team heading for the summit. And I gotta tell you, it was glorious. 6 weeks ago, when I began thinking about what I would share with you this morning, the story emerged right away. And right away, I tried to submerge it. Believing that these kinds of things come from my inner teacher, my first thoughts to that inner teacher were, seriously, you want me to talk about going to the bathroom on the side of Mount Rainier? But the more I resisted, the more I heard that whisper in the days and even in my dreams, this is the story to share. This month has been about exploring perseverance. And next month is about balance. And as I was preparing to stand here on the cusp, on this threshold between February and March, winter and spring, I found myself wondering how I might bridge these two themes. Now, most of us, I'm imagining, are familiar with the Chinese yin-yang symbol, okay? That symbol that signifies a dynamic tension that connects rather than separates life's basic polarities in an interdependent, counterbalancing system. In the second verse of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu writes, "Being and non-being arise together. Hard and easy complete each other. Long and short shape each other. High and low depend on each other. Note and voice make music together. Before and after follow each other." So as I've been thinking about perseverance, I've also been drawn to thinking about its counterbalance, which for me is surrender. The Gospels of Merriam and Webster define perseverance as continued and strong effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. Forging ahead, steadfastness. Sometimes I think we can get on a treadmill of sorts, thinking of perseverance as going. A kind of active commitment or drive to endure, no matter what, in the pursuit of a particular project, idea, work, or relationship. Merriam and Webster define surrender as giving up to the power, control, or possession of another upon demand. To give oneself over to something. For many, surrender is perhaps passive, suggesting submission or quitting, like someone throwing their arms up in the air saying, "I surrender, I surrender." If we think about perseverance and surrender as separate and apart from one another, they can look like opposing points on the extremes of a continuum, as if they're in conflict with one another. But what if we think of them as connected and interdependent? The philosopher Alan Watts, writing about yin and yang, suggests that there's a kind of rhythmic movement taking place, where pushing on is yang and pausing is yin. Think of the image of geese flying in that beautiful and familiar V formation in the sky. The birds take turns being in the front, one persevering in the lead, and eventually changing position, falling back and surrendering to rest. On the first page of the theme packet this month, we read, quote, as a people of perseverance, we are being called not just to grit and strong wills, but to gentleness and self-care. Constantly pushing ourselves without giving ourselves the gift of pause gets us nowhere. These sentiments strike me as invitations to dwell within that rhythmic movement of perseverance and surrender, rather than forging toward one and away from the other. But how do we know when and how to change our position? In his book, Enough, Bill McKibben identifies something he calls our enough point. That moment, that instance, when something that has been good turns into something troublesome or bad. It's that moment when something that has perhaps been a strength turns into a strength overused, even a liability. McKibben offers the example of driving. So going 55 miles an hour is absolutely going to get us where we want to go faster than if we go 25 miles per hour. But if we start driving 125 miles per hour, we'll likely reach our demise. Trudging through the snow and the ice on Mount Rainier, telling myself, one step at a time, helped me to persevere for a while. And then eventually my mantra stopped working. At that last rest stop before the summit, my had reached my enough point. And that point was fairly obvious. My body was not going to let me push on, forge ahead for much longer. I needed to surrender to my body's needs before I could continue. But what about when the signals aren't that obvious? What helps us to find our enough point? My spouse and I have some dear friends that we have known for decades. They live out of town, so we don't get to see them very often. There was a time when we would get together for long weekends and spend the first full day of those weekends hearing about how busy their lives are. One of them is a self-described workaholic. The other is a self-described volunteeraholic. Do we have any of those in here? They'd give us long litanies about how much they were working and volunteering and how much people appreciated their tenacity and drive. By the end of those weekends, however, they'd be talking about how much they yearned to change their schedules so that they'd have more time to relax or more time to do things they enjoyed doing together. The last time we got together, we noticed that they weren't talking about their busy lives that much. Wow, you two really seem to slow down, my spouse observed. And our friends responded, yeah. One day we realized that the standard answer to, how was your day today, honey, was busy. And then we realized that neither one of us was asking how the other's day was anymore. That's when we decided we needed to make a change. And so now we ask, what was a moment of joy in your day today? And you know, those moments of joy rarely have anything to do with work. They're usually about moments in the day when we spontaneously stop to take a breath, to share a coffee or a walk with a good friend or colleague, or notice something unexpected. Earlier, we meditated on John O'Donohue's words, and the words that resonate for me, quote, we are often surprised by change that seems to arrive out of nowhere. We find ourselves crossing some new threshold that we never anticipated. A threshold is a sacred thing. It's a gateway from one possibility to another, from one way of living to another way of living, from one way of being to another way of being. It's that space, perhaps, between perseverance and surrender, that still point at the center of yin and yang. The writer Sue Monk Kidd refers to this space as a threshold moment, wherein things can go either way. We can let the situation thrust us into the heart of transformation, or we can regress into our same old patterns. This threshold moment then is an opportunity to wade into the passive endurance of the pause and listen for that whisper of our inner voice, our inner teacher, God, Allah, Great Spirit, whatever name fits for you. This is what you need to do. As a progressive community of perseverance in the current social, political, and ecological climate, many of us are feeling called to participate differently in politics, schools, and other social institutions. Some of us have joined groups and organizations we never considered joining before. Some of us are paying more attention to the news than ever before. Some of us are experiencing troubling relationships with people we've known for years. And still some of us aren't quite sure how to engage others whose attitudes and beliefs confound and even repel us. We as a progressive community are at a threshold moment, being invited into that rhythmic movement of what we know to be troubling and tragic, like the behavior of certain politicians and another school shooting, and what we know to be positive and possible, that spring is right around the corner, and that the children we love are happy, safe, and warm. Like climbing a mountain, we can be certain that there will be contradictions and obstacles on our paths, places where we will slip, boulders we may not be able to climb over, beautiful, unexpected vistas that we'll want to stay and enjoy, and moments when we might have that sick feeling and just need to stop for a little while. In these moments when we feel exposed, enthralled, petrified, or resistant, these threshold moments are inviting us to pause and listen. There's a Taoist saying, all Taoists live on the mountain, and the mountain is your life. May your mountains be great, your journeys be illuminating, and your hearts be courageous and content.
Sling, you want to join hands, and the words are in the insert, or the word right. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.